I am Mr. Sandeep Dattray Kardile, M.Pharm Pharmaceutics, lecturer, Mola Rural Institute of Pharmacy, Sony, and giving presentation on Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940, Part 3. First of all, contents of my presentation: import of drugs, import of cosmetics, prohibition of manufacture, classes of drugs prohibited to be sold, then labeling and packaging. Firstly, import of drugs. In that, classes of drugs prohibited to import. Import of drug under license. You know that many drugs they are imported in India. The drugs which are imported in India, it is divided into different classes. So there is a need of a license for importing that particular drugs. So these drugs they are classified as, firstly, drugs specified in Schedule X, and second, any new drugs. Also, in that, drugs exempted from provisions of import and the offences and penalties for these drugs which are imported. Then, classes of drugs prohibited to import. In that, misbranded drugs, drugs of substandard quality. So, you know that the drugs which are imported in India, if that drugs they are of misbranded quality, or sometimes what happens, the drug it is belongs to one company, in label there is mentioned the name of one company, but actually the product it is not the same of that company, or the content active pharmaceutical ingredient it is different. So that drugs are prohibited. Then drugs of substandard quality, you know that a different quality control test they are taken of the imported drugs, assays of that drugs they are taken, then another different quality control parameters of the tablets they are taken. But if our drug which is importing in India, if that is not maintaining that particular standard, means if it is of a substandard quality, so that drugs they are prohibited from the import. Then adulterated drugs, some drugs they are adulterated means they will contain some different ingredients other than active constituent and excipients of that particular dosage form. So that drugs which contain other foreign material, so that drugs they are called as adulterated drugs. So these adulterated drugs they are also prohibited from the import. Then spurious drugs, some drugs they are spurious drugs means the drugs which are belong to that particular company which does not actually present, or some false company it is mentioned, or it contains some colors or some excipients which are not authorized in Indian pharmacopoeia or British pharmacopoeia. So that particular drugs they are called as a spurious drugs. Drugs whose manufacture, sale or distribution are prohibited in original country except for the purpose of test, examination and analysis. So sometimes what happen, some drugs that are prohibited for selling in their own country. For example, if one drug is there, for example paracetamol, it is not giving permission in any particular country, for example in America, but still that country they are exporting that drug to India. So at that time that drugs are also prohibited from the import except for the purpose of test, examination and analysis. Unless and until the examination or analysis or the test of that drug it is taken, it is not imported in India. Then patent or proprietary medicines whose true formula is not disclosed. So when unless and until formula it is disclosed, drugs that are not given permission to import into India. Then import of the biological drugs means schedule C and C1. Conditions to be fulfilled. Which conditions should be fulfilled for importing these biological drugs into India? First, licensee must have adequate facility for the storage. Adequate facility means proper conditions like refrigerator or ventilation facilities, etc. Then licensee must maintain a record of the sale showing the particulars of the names of the drugs and of the persons to whom they have to be sold. Then licensee must allow an inspector to inspect premises and to check the records. Then licensee must furnish the sample to the authority. Then import of the schedule X drugs. So they are also called as a narcotic and psychotropic drugs. So which conditions should be fulfilled? First, licensee must have adequate storage facility. Second, applicant must be reputable in the occupation, trade or business. Then third, the licensee granted ever before should not be suspended or cancelled. Means the license which is granted should not be suspended or cancelled. Drugs imported for examination, test or analysis. Conditions to be fulfilled. First, license is necessary under Form 2. Second, it must use imported drugs only for said purpose and at the place specified in the license. Third, it must keep the record with respect to quantities, name of the manufacturer and date of import. Next, it must allow an inspector to inspect the premises and check the records. Then which cosmetics they are prohibited from importing? Firstly, misbranded cosmetics, then spurious cosmetics, then cosmetic containing harmful ingredients, then cosmetics not of standard quality, then cosmetics which contains more than 2 ppm arsenic, 20 ppm lead or 10 ppm heavy metals. So these cosmetics they are prohibited from import into India. Then offenses and penalties related to import of drugs. So if the substandard quality of the drugs or spurious drugs or cosmetics they are imported in India, what are its offenses and penalties? First, offense import of spurious or adulterated drug or drug which involves risk to human beings or animals or drug not having therapeutic values. At that time, penalty will be A. 3 years imprisonment and 5,000 rupees fine on first conviction, or B. 5 years imprisonment or 1,000 rupees fine or both for subsequent conviction. Then, if the person it acts contravention of the provision or the act, at that time A. 6 month imprisonment or 500 rupees fine or both for first conviction, and secondly 1 year imprisonment or 1,000 rupees fine for subsequent offence. Then prohibition of manufacture. So according to this particular act, means Drug and Cosmetic Act 1940, so government it has a power to prohibit manufacturing of drugs in India also. Firstly, in which conditions drugs are prohibited from manufacture? Firstly, drug not of standard quality or misbranded, adulterated or spurious drug. If the drugs which are manufactured in country, in particular pharmaceutical company, if it is misbranded or adulterated or spurious. In that condition, this manufacturing it can be prohibited. Then patent or proprietary medicine. So when patent it is provided, the right to manufacture that particular drug is of particular company, so it will prohibit other companies from manufacturing the same drug. Then drug which claims to cure diseases specified in schedule J. So it can be also prohibited. Schedule J diseases, that are the diseases which are not cured easily. So if the drugs which are manufacturing that particular medicines, so they can also prohibit these drugs. Then drugs which is risky to human beings or animals. So the drugs which are harmful to human beings or which can cause danger to the life of human beings, so there can be prohibition of these manufacturing of that drugs also. And drugs without therapeutic value, some drugs are having only placebo effect, they are not having in therapeutic value. So this manufacturing of that particular drugs which are not having any therapeutic value, they can be also prohibited. Then types of manufacturing license, so this is also very important point, which are different types of manufacturing licenses. For allopathic drugs, it is classified into 5 main classes. First, other than schedule C1 and X drug, it is having for repacking license. Then schedule C1 but not X, if it is having own premises and for loan license. Then for schedule X drug, there should be own premises. Then schedule C and C1 and X drug, there is a need of own premises. Then lastly, drugs for the purpose of examination, test or analysis. So these are different types of manufacturing license. Manufacturing of drugs other than in schedule C1. So what are the conditions? Firstly, premises should comply with schedule M. Then adequate facility for testing separate from manufacturing. Adequate storage facility should be available. Then records of manufacturing and testing maintained for at least 2 years from the date of expiry. Then license should provide sample to authority. These conditions should be fulfilled by a company. Then furnish data of stability for checking expiry date of the drug. Then maintain the inspection book. Then maintain reference samples from each batch. So when different batches they are manufactured or formulated, so from each batch sample should be taken. Then accounts of production are recorded and maintained for 5 years or 1 year after expiry. Then manufacture of schedule X drug, so which conditions should be fulfilled? Firstly, they have to send invoice of sale to licensing authority every 3 months. Then store drugs in direct custody of responsible person. Then preparation must be labeled with X or X. Marketed in packing not exceeding. Then 100 unit dose should be there for tablet or capsules. So in liquid it should not exceed 300 ml. In injection 5 ml should be the maximum capacity. Manufacture of drugs, those in schedule C1 are biological products. So which conditions should be fulfilled? Firstly, drug must be issued in previously sterilized sealed glass or suitable container. Then container should comply with requirements of schedule F and F1. Then drug must comply with standard quality, purity, strength specified in schedule F. Then parenteral in doses of 10 ml or more should be tested for freedom from pyrogens. Then separate lab for culture and manipulation of spore bearing pathogens. Then test for sterility should be carried out. Then penalties related to manufacture. Offences and penalties. Firstly, manufacture of any spurious drugs, 1 to 3 years imprisonment and rupees 5,000 fine. Secondly, 2 to 6 years imprisonment and rupees 10,000 fine on subsequent conviction. Then second offence, manufacture of adulterated drugs. And first time, 1 year imprisonment and rupees 2,000 fine. Secondly, 2-year imprisonment and rupees 2,000 fine for subsequent conviction. In third offence, manufacturing of drugs in contravention of the provisions. Firstly, penalties, imprisonment up to 3 months and rupees 500 fine. In second conviction, imprisonment up to 6 months and rupees 1000 fine on subsequent conviction. Then loan license. Definition: a person or applicant who does not have its own arrangement or factory for manufacture but who wish to avail the manufacturing facilities owned by another licensee. Such licenses are called as a loan licenses. Procedure for taking loan license: license is obtained from licensing authority, that is FDA, on application in prescribed forms, form number 24A, 27A, with prescribed fees of rupees 6,000, sometimes 1,500. Repacking license. Definition: process of breaking up any drug from a bulk container into small packages and labeling with a view to their sale and distribution. Repacking of drugs is granted of drugs other than Schedule C, C1 and X. Procedure: license is obtained from licensing authority, that is FDA, on application in prescribed forms, that is 24B, with prescribed fees rupees 500 or 200. Types of sales licenses for allopathic drugs: wholesale, then drugs in Schedule X. Then in case of retail, it is divided into two parts: general license and restricted license. So general license, it is divided into three types: drugs in Schedule X, drugs in Schedule CC1 and drugs other than Schedule CC1. In case of restricted license, it is divided again into two types: drugs other than Schedule CC1 and for Schedule CC1. Then sales from motor vehicles or vendor. It is also divided into two types: drugs other than Schedule C1 and for Schedule C1. Classes of drugs prohibited to be sold: misbranded, spurious, adulterated, and drugs not of standard quality. Then patent or proprietary drugs with undisclosed formula. Then Schedule J drugs. Then expired drugs. Then wholesale of biological, that is C1. Adequate premises with greater than 10 meter square area with proper storage facility should be available. Drugs sold only to retailer having license, and premises should be in charge of competent person who is registered pharmacist. Record of purchase and sale. Record preserved for 3 years from date of sale. License should be displayed on premises. Then wholesale of other than those specified in Schedule C, C1 and X. All conditions as discussed in for biological, and compounding is made by or under the direct and personal supervision of a qualified person. The retail sale. For retail sale, two types of licenses are issued. First, general licenses. Second, restricted licenses. Firstly, restricted license granted to those dealers who do not engage the services of a qualified person and only deal with such classes of drugs whose sales can be effected without qualified person, and vendors who do not have fixed premises. Then labeling and packaging. All the general and specific labeling and packaging specified to all classes of drugs and cosmetics should be as per the provisions made under the Act. Lastly, thank you